Have you ever thought about creating your own podcast? It can be really exciting, but all the stuff you can find online feels overwhelming and overcomplicated. Don't worry though, you're not the only one who feels that way. As we're seeing a rise of people getting into the creator economy, we are going to see more and more podcasts getting started every single year. In fact, last year, Listen Notes found over 25 million new episodes released. But even though more and more people are creating their own podcasts, for a lot of people, their dream of having their own show still feels so far away. What if starting your own podcast is way easier than you think? What if you can start your own podcast in just 3 simple, easy steps? I know that can be true because that's exactly what we're going to talk about in this video. I started researching about podcasting back in 2019 when I read something that said audio content is the future. I devoured all the videos that I can devour at that time. I watched all the videos on YouTube about how to start a podcast, but I couldn't find one single video that was simple to understand, easy to digest, yet will cover the step-by-step on how to start one. And so I stopped researching and I just went there and I just did it. Fortunately, I was able to grow my podcast from 50 listens a month to becoming the 21st Spotify exclusive podcast here in the Philippines. And of course, earning hundreds of thousands of pesos along the way. After a year of seeing my success, I decided that it's time to share my knowledge or the principles that I used that allowed me to see success in my podcast to everyone that I know. So I created my first ever course called Podcast Masterclass, which is, by the way, a step-by-step, in-depth guide on how you could start and grow your podcast. You can check it out below. But since there are still a lot of people sending me messages, replying to my comments saying, how can I start a podcast? I decided to create a YouTube video out of it. And so today, I'm going to share with you on how you can finally start your own podcast. Hopefully this helps. Okay, so the simplest way of starting a podcast is asking yourself these 3 questions. Number 1, what is your podcast about? You can't start a podcast if you don't know what you're going to talk about. So think about something, a topic, an idea, a concept that you're really interested in, that you're passionate about, and you can talk about it for hours and even want to share it with a friend or even a random stranger. It can be about relationships. It can be about dogs. It can be about gaming. It can be about finances. It can be about social media. It can be about anything as long as your heart is in it and you truly want to share it to the world. It's just anything that you want to have a conversation about. Because after all, when you're listening to a podcast, it just feels like you're listening to a conversation. Right? You can talk about movies, sports, manifestation, success, anything that your heart is into, as long as you feel like you want to start a conversation about this. Because let's face it, listening to a podcast just feels like that. It just feels like you are listening to a conversation, or better, you're eavesdropping into a conversation that you're really interested in. After that, decide what type of podcast do you want to create. Are you doing interview podcasts where you're going to invite a guest and ask them, interview them on the spot? Or are you doing solo educational podcasts? Or maybe you're going to do a storytelling podcast. Or maybe you're going to do a group podcast. Any type of podcast is great as long as you're comfortable doing it. And also, you can mix it up as well. I do that. Sometimes I do solo casts. Sometimes I do group podcasts. Sometimes I also do interview podcasts. Whatever I feel like I want to do with my podcast. Can be a variety show if you want. The other thing that you should consider is the length of the podcast. What's the perfect length? Well, traditionally, a long podcast usually lasts up to an hour. But honestly, in this era, in this day of age, we can see that the attention span of people are getting shorter and shorter, which is why I truly believe that the bigger value you can give in the shorter amount of time will give you the most leverage in this area. And again, the length of your podcast will totally depend on the type of your podcast. For example, I do solo casts that usually last around 15 minutes to 20 minutes. And when I do interview podcasts, I usually talk with a guest from 40 minutes to 60 minutes. But again, rule of thumb, the more value I can give in the shorter amount of time, the better. Next is deciding on your title. There are 3 ways that you can decide on your title. Number 1, use a creative term. Think about something that is witty, something creative that connects to the message of your podcast. The second one is using a descriptive term. You can literally say what the podcast is about on the title. For example, there's 7 good minutes of self-improvement. There's the daily stoic. There's the 2-minute motivation. Exactly what the podcast is about. And the third way is using your own name as the title of your show, which I do not recommend. I don't recommend this unless you're the huge celebrity in your area or in your country, or you just have a huge base following, go ahead. But if you're starting to build your brand and identity online, it's better that you use a creative term and combine it with your own name. And hopefully you just write up with that title. Some of the titles that I love is Adulting with Joy Spring, Punchline with Alex Calleja, the Cool Pals as well. These are creative terms combined with their own names, and that's also what I use with Small Talk with Ale Cuenca. At the end of the day, starting your own show with your own name might sound a little full of yourself, and you don't want that, so might not be the best option for you. Next is podcast art. Podcast art is the first point of entry of curiosity of the audience. This is the first thing that they're going to see on your show. So you got to make sure that it's enticing and people would want to click on it. Some of my tips include, number 1, use 3000 by 3000 pixels. Maximize the size of your podcast art. Second is you got to make sure that the words that you put there are readable. So use great fonts to make sure that your title is standing out. After all, if you look at it, the podcast art is a little small, so you want to make sure that it really pops out on your feed. The third one is pick a color that represents you the best. You need to have a color that will stand out, but will also represent your brand and your message. By the way, if you're enjoying these tips, I would appreciate if you would click that like button below. Apparently, it helps me with the algorithm and I would be more engaged to creating more content like this. So, moving on. The second question you should ask yourself is, what equipment should I use? When it comes to equipment, you only need 3 things. You need a microphone, a dedicated microphone. You need a headset. And you need a recording software. That's all you need. And let me get this straight. A lot of people say, content is king and you should start with whatever equipment that you can start with. But I totally disagree. If you have a better equipment, you would have better quality, especially in podcasting. In podcasts, content is not king. Audio is. So you got to make sure you have a better audio quality because that's the only thing that people would listen to or get in contact with from your podcast. If it's not audible, they won't listen to it. But I'm not saying you should buy the most expensive equipment right away, but I suggest investing in a dedicated microphone, in a headset, and of course, in recording software that you know that you can utilize along the way. Always remember, good input equals good output, and garbage in equals garbage out. I'll be posting a full list of the gears that I use and I recommend with different price range so you can check it out. And full disclaimer, it has affiliate links, so I'll be earning a little percentage if you buy from the link, and it will really help the podcast and this channel. So if you'd like, please buy from the links below. But in this video, I'll still be recommending my top picks, starting with the microphone. As you can see, I'm using the Shure MV7 and I love this, which is the mini version of the SM7B. It's like the brother of the Shure SM7B. And the Shure SM7B is the best microphone that people use in their shows, in their podcasts, and even recording in the studio. But this one is really made for podcasters. They made it in an affordable price that you can get the same quality, same amazing quality for half the price of the Shure SM7B. I have been using this mic for 2 years now, and I don't think I will change mic anytime soon. The next one is headsets. Headsets are important because you want to hear yourself when you're talking in your podcast to make sure that, number 1, you don't get the mistake of not being able to say, oh no, I didn't plug in my microphone. And you would understand or you would hear in real time if you're too close or too far away from the microphone. So that's very, very important. The second one, here's something that I didn't know about headsets. Apparently, there's bits of audio that you don't hear in a regular earphone or an AirPod. But if you buy those good headsets, you can get down to the tiniest detail of the audio and you can edit it, and it's really helpful for the post-processing. So for the headsets, I recommend using Audio-Technica ATH-M20X. Well, to be fair, it's the only headset that I've ever used. I loved it. In our podcast network, that's also something that we use. The last one that you would need is a recording software. I use Audacity. Audacity has been there for me ever since I was little and was trying to edit all of these music for Christmas parties. And right now, I'm still using it for two main reasons. Number one, it's free. And number two, it's so easy and simple to use. Okay, but if you're using a Mac, you can also use GarageBand. If you want a better version, you can use the Adobe Audition. You can check that out if you want. But for me, Audacity is really great. Not paid, not advertised, but I just really recommend it because I've been using it for quite some time now. Now, I won't be able to teach you everything about the recording software, so make sure that if you want the step-by-step guide, click on the course below. Also, bonus tip. I heard that there's an AI software called Adobe Podcast where you would upload your audio file and they would clean your audio. I haven't tried it out, but I will try it out with this. So if you're listening to this, probably I put it in Adobe Podcast. So check it out as well. This is really helpful if you're trying to save time and energy, and plus AI is the future. The last one you need to consider is where do you put it? A lot of people are asking me, Alec, how do you upload your podcast on Spotify? I answer them with, I don't. You can't upload a podcast on Spotify. Spotify is a streaming platform. It's where the music and the podcast is getting streamed from. But where you post or upload your podcast is on a hosting platform. And the hosting platform that I use was formerly known as Anchor.fm and is now known Spotify for podcasters. And there are also other hosting platforms such as Acast, Podbean, or Buzzsprout. The reason why I love Anchor.fm or Spotify for podcasters so much is, again, for two reasons. Number one, it's free. And number two, it's so simple to use. Everything that I need to do to upload my podcast is there, and I would just wait. And within the day, I would have my podcast on Spotify already. So go check it out. Watch other videos on how to navigate, how to learn from it, and just start. And voila. After that, you have your show on Spotify and on the other streaming platforms as well, and you have a show. Congratulations! Now you have all the tools and the information you need to start your own podcast. Don't wait, apply this right now, and hopefully I can see your podcast online. And I hope this helped. If this is not enough, again, the course that I created, the Podcast Masterclass, is available below. And you can watch all my other videos to help you with it. And of course, if you want to learn more about personal development, relationships, or content creation, or anything, just watch all of my other videos in my YouTube channel. And of course, watch this video where I will talk about relationships and how it could help you with your life. So that's all. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.